Hello and welcome to a new video. This is lesson 4 for unit 3 of my Algebra 1 series, and we're talking about writing linear equations still. I imagine you're getting tired of it, but we're almost there. We've almost gone through all the situations that they're going to give us. So today we're doing writing linear equations given 2 points. So this is a joke, this next line. If you hadn't noticed, I've been putting jokes here. It's like writing linear equations 2.0 because 2 points, 2.0. I've heard it's not as funny if you explain it, but I have no scientific evidence to back that up, so I'm just going to keep explaining my jokes and see what happens. Anyway, if you'd like a notes page to use to follow along with this, you can click the link in the description and go to my website and get that notes page for free. Let's go ahead and start with a warm-up. Our warm-up here, it has been a little bit since we've done this. What is the slope of a line that goes through the points 2, -4, and -6, 0? There's 2 ways to do this, to find slope. One is we could graph this and count out the rise over the run. And the second is to use the slope formula. The slope formula is written down right underneath this, I think, if you have the notes page. But I don't have it right here on the screen. So here's what our slope formula looks like. It's the change in y over the change in x, and we get that by subtracting our y values and subtracting our x values and making a fraction out of them, where the y is on top and the x is on bottom. That's because slope is rise over run, and so rise has to do with the change in y, run has to do with the change in x. So that's why our formula is that way. So we're going to plug in these 2 points. Remember, we label these as our first point, x1 and y1, our second point, x2 and y2. That's what the little ones and the little 2's mean, is it's a way for us to distinguish between both of these are x and y, but one's the first point, one's the second point. It doesn't matter which one you label which, by the way. You just have to be consistent, as in I can't label x1, y2 in the same point and x2, y1. I can't mix them up. That would be bad. All right, let's plug this in. M equals y2 is 0, and then y1 is -4. x2 is -6, and x1 is 2, so I'm going to -2. So here's what happens, remember, with the slope formula, that because we're subtracting these, it changes whatever the second number is, it changes the sign, basically. So when I do 0 minus -4, what I'm actually doing is 0 plus 4. And then when I do -6 minus 2, I'm doing -6 minus 2. Remember that 2 negatives here mean that we add these together. The -2 is making -6 more negative, so this should be -8. On top, 0 plus 4 is 4. When I divide these, if I have one negative, it makes it overall negative, and then I always simplify my fraction. So if it's 4 over 8, I say what divides into both of those numbers. You could say 2, but an even better answer would be 4. So this ends up being -1/2. That's the slope we get for the line that goes through these 2 points. Now, technically, we've already done this in an earlier lesson, so that's not supposed to be anything new. That's why it's a warm-up. What we're going to do today is try to go through the same process, but actually finish it by finding the equation of the line that goes through the 2 points, not just the slope. So here's basically all the stuff that we've done, right? Slope, which we just warmed up with. We're talking about slope-intercept form and point-slope form in this unit. And as far as how to write our answers, we could write them either in slope-intercept form or in point-slope form. Typically, which one you choose to do has to do with what you've been taught, or what your teacher tells you to put it in, or what the instructions tell you to put it in. So for me, I would like you to use the way that makes the most sense to you. And so I'm not going to be specifying which way you should do it. I just want you to basically write it in one of these 2 ways. So I will switch back and forth between the 2 to remind you basically how to do each of these forms. But what's different in this lesson is we're not being told the slope. We're going to have to find the slope. All of our previous lessons where we've been writing have told us in one way or another what the slope is, but not today. We're going to have to find it ourselves, and that's going to be our first step. So let's take a look at example 1. Write the equation of a line that goes through the following points, -4, 8, and 4, 2. Again, it says write the equation. It doesn't tell me what form to put it in. So I can choose which form I want. No matter what, my first step is finding slope. So I can label this x1, y1, and x2, y2, and look back at my slope formula if I need to, and plug it in. So this should be 2 minus 8 over 4 minus negative 4, so that's plus 4. So that gives me negative 6 on top and 8 on bottom. I simplify that. That overall is a negative. They both divide by 2, so I get negative 3/4 as my answer for slope. That's just the first part though. Let's see. Do you think we should, let's do this in slope-intercept form. So to put it into slope-intercept form without putting it in point slope at all, we have to pick one of these 2 points to plug in as x and y. Okay, so this is what we did in 3.2 a couple lessons ago. So what we need to do is we need to pick one of these 2 points. It doesn't matter which one. I guess I'll pick 4 and 2 because they're both positive. I'm going to plug them in with the slope that I found and then solve this for b. So I do have to do some multiplication here. Negative 3/4 times 4 over 1, the 4's cancel, and I just get negative 3 times 1, which is negative 3, which means I need to add 3 to both sides and get 5. So in slope-intercept form, the equation of the line that goes through these 2 points is y equals negative 3/4 x plus 5. Now here's the thing, if you wrote it in point slope form instead, that's going to look very different. If you decided to do point slope form, there's actually 2 possible answers because we have 2 different points. You could have done y minus 8 equals negative 3/4 and then x plus 4. That's if I use the first point, so that's a possible answer. If I use the second point, I'd get y minus 2 equals negative 3/4 and then x minus 4. That's also a possible answer. You don't have to have all 3 of these answers. You have to have one of them. Also, what's neat about this, or something I think is neat, is those 2 point slope formulas look different, right? But if we do solve them both for y, we should get y equals negative 3/4 x plus 5, because all of these are the equations of the exact same line. So if we needed to check ourselves, one way to do that would be to go ahead and go all the way to slope-intercept form to see if we get the right answer. So if you're like, I just don't know which way I want to write it, try picking away and going with it. If you just really don't like decisions, try point slope out. I think point slope, for whatever reason, when we're in Algebra 1, seems a little bit intimidating and scary, but it's actually a really cool way of writing an equation of a line. It's a lot less work, and it will definitely help you as you go through math later on. So that's my 2 cents. Example 2, 6, 3, and negative 5, negative 8. So again, let's start by finding the slope. So x1, y1, x2, y2. So our slope is negative 8 minus 3 over negative 5 minus 6. So that gives me negative 11 over negative 11. I was worried for a second that we were going to have a slope with an 11 in it. But these cancel and actually divide to be a positive 1, which is kind of nice. So now we go, okay, how do I want to write this? We did the first one in slope-intercept form, although we actually technically wrote it all 3 ways. Let's walk through the process of putting this in point slope form. We've got this 1 for slope, and then we've got to just choose one of these 2 points. It does not matter which one. Yes, it gives different answers depending on which one you do, but just because they're different doesn't mean that one of them is right or wrong. And in fact, I will go ahead and write all 3 answers again this time as well. If I use the first point in point slope, I'd do y minus 3 equals 1 times x minus 6. That's one of our possible answers. My next possible answer would be using the second point. So whenever I minus these negatives, it'll change to plus. So y plus 8 equals 1 times x plus 5. Then if you decide to get slope-intercept form instead, what that would look like is y equals 1x, or just x. And technically we don't need the ones here either. I would argue that, especially in Algebra 1, if you're going to put it in point slope, you might as well leave the 1 there so that it's really obvious what the slope is, but maybe that's just me. And then our y-intercept that we would have gotten should be -3. So if you worked it out to get slope-intercept form, this is the answer that you should have gotten. So you don't have to have all 3 of these. You just have to pick which way makes the most sense to me and stick with that. Example 3. So we are going to have our special cases happen to us here of undefined slope or 0 slope. And if we recognize that it is one of those situations at the beginning, it means that we can write our answers super fast. Like, I can just look at this and know what the answer is. And I'm going to help you hopefully learn how to do that as well. This has -2, 7 and -2, 14. Here's the deal. If both of our points have -2 for our x value, then that means that they are lined up vertically, which means we have a vertical line, which means we actually can write this right away. And in fact, if we don't realize that and we do our slope formula, we're going to run into an issue, because we're going to have 14 minus 7 over -2 plus 2, which is 7 over 0. We cannot divide by 0, so we get undefined. And when we get undefined, we can't plug it into a formula. We just have to know that it's x equals a number. But here's what's really cool, because they gave us 2 points. Anytime you see a repeated value for either both x's or both y's, you can immediately know what the equation is. If x has to equal -2 for both of these points, then x has to equal -2 all the time, because I can't like squiggle around and still have a straight line. So I can actually, if I notice at the very beginning that these are the same, I can say, oh, well, x equals -2. That's my answer. It would be x because it's the x value that's staying the same. It would be x because our slope is undefined. It would be x if we realize it's a vertical line. Whatever connection you have to make there to figure that out, make that connection, okay? So, and these will be kind of interspersed probably with other problems. So be on the lookout for that repeated value. If you find the slope and then realize that it is undefined or 0, then you can go ahead and get there at that point as well. Example 4. Okay, no repeated x value, no repeated y value. So we're going to have to work this out. So for our slope, we need x1, y1, x2, y2. So 2 plus 3, because we're minusing a -3, and -6 minus 4. This gives us 5 over -10. Simplify that and get -1/2. That's our slope. Now you got to decide which way do you want to do this. I'll do slope-intercept form because I think that's the harder one, even if it's the way that maybe we like more. We just pick one of these points, it doesn't matter which one, to plug in as x and y, so that we get -3 equals -1/2 times x, which is 4, so I'll just make that 4 over 1, plus b. Multiply these fractions together and get -2. And then we add 2 to both sides and get -1 equals b. So in slope-intercept form, our answer is y equals -1/2 x minus 1. Our other 2 possibilities, again, you don't have to write all 3 of these. I'm writing all 3 of these so that no matter how you chose to do it, you can check your answer. And you might play around with this, maybe come back to this a little bit later and try it again, doing it a different way and see if it makes sense. So these are our 3 possibilities here for the equation of this line. All right, remember we're on the lookout for repeated x or repeated y. So 7 and -5, not repeated. 2 and 2 is repeated. So this time our y value is the same. So that trick we used earlier where the x values were the same, so it was x equals, we're going to use here. The y value is the same. So this has to be y equals 2 because if y equals 2 in one point and the other point, that's talking about a horizontal line, that the y value is the same the whole way through. So we can just right off the bat get our answer as y equals 2 if we recognize that. If we don't recognize that, it may be that we have to go ahead and find the slope, which we'd get 2 minus 2 on top, which is how we're getting a 0 for slope since it's a horizontal line. It doesn't really matter what the bottom ends up being if the top is 0, just overall our answer is 0. Then we can choose, okay, how do I want to plug this in? Or maybe at this point we realize it should be y equals a number. If you do choose to plug it in, the same thing happens that's been happening. You can write it in point slope form with the 0. You can figure out what the y-intercept is using slope-intercept form. But either way, the easiest thing to do is just to say, oh, they're both 2's. That's the y value, so y equals 2. But you've got to do practice to recognize that for both the x's and the y's. So that's kind of a shortcut we have. All right, that's our lesson. I've got at least one more lesson I want to do in this unit, so get prepared for that probably next week. Thanks so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe, like, comment, all that good jazz, and all that good stuff. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.